The story centers around a boy named Jimmy Livingston, who is born with absolutely no immune system. His mother, Mrs. Livingston, is excessively protective of her son. He wasn't even allowed to come home until he was 4 years old. However, after he turned 4, she and Mr. Livingston brought their little boy home in his protective bubble. His room also contains a large bubble, allowing him to move around inside. Mrs. Livingston never wants him to leave the bubble, so she concludes her bedtime stories with the princess dying because they were set free. He is only allowed to watch one TV channel and read one magazine because Mrs. Livingston claims they are the only ones in existence. Everyone in the city knows about the unusual bubble boy, but it doesn't benefit him. Jimmy's diet consists solely of homemade food. Now 16 years old, Jimmy narrates that he grew up like any other kid and is delighted when he receives an electric guitar instead of a car. One day, while at his window, he sees a new girl his age named Chloe moving into his neighborhood. He becomes fond of her but is powerless to do anything about it. One morning, he wakes up with an erection and is absolutely terrified. Mrs. Livingston enters and has him recite the Pledge of Allegiance until he calms down. Chloe has a group of popular friends who mock Jimmy, referring to him as the Bubble Boy. However, she seems to defend him. One day, Chloe visits the Livingstons' home, and Mr. Livingston lets her in. Intrigued by the network of plastic tubes throughout the house, she follows them to Jimmy's room. Jimmy is both surprised and nervous, as his mother is the only woman he has ever spoken to. Chloe chats with him and expresses her fondness for his guitar. With the extended hands, Jimmy tries to teach her how to play it, but he starts reciting the Pledge of Allegiance in the middle of the lesson. From that day on, the two become inseparable. Chloe gives Jimmy a guinea pig in a ball for his birthday and even brings kids into his room for Halloween. On her birthday, a tipsy Chloe sneaks into Jimmy's room through the window. She attempts to enter the bubble, claiming she can't stay away from him any longer, but passes out before she can get inside. The story transitions to Chloe's prom night. Her lewd boyfriend, Mark, arrives to pick her up, leaving Jimmy heartbroken. Mark offers Jimmy a cigarette, but he doesn't know what it is. One evening, Jimmy witnesses Mark and Chloe making out through his window. The following day, Chloe visits Jimmy's room and shows him her engagement ring. Mark had proposed to her, and they plan to marry that weekend at Niagara Falls. She has come to inform Jimmy, who is disappointed but hides his emotions. In the story, Chloe brings Jimmy a present, which she leaves in his decontamination chamber. Tearful, Chloe departs. Later, when Jimmy discovers that the gift is a snow globe with "I love you" written inside, he is moved and sets off to Niagara Falls to halt the wedding. Determined, Jimmy designs a portable bubble shield to protect himself and manages to leave his house without his parents noticing. Overjoyed to be running for the first time, he arrives at the bus station and inquires about a ticket. Unfortunately, he has no money, and as he attempts to cross the street, a bus strikes him. His bubble shield saves him, and the passengers on the bus offer him a ride. He learns that they are members of a religious cult, and when he exposes them, they angrily expel him from the bus. The group later realizes that Jimmy was their prophesied savior and sets off to find him. In the meantime, Jimmy encounters a biker named Slim, who empathizes with his story and shares his own tale of a long-lost love named Wildfire. Slim offers to give Jimmy a lift, and the duo heads toward Niagara Falls. Back home, Mrs. Livingston discovers Jimmy's absence and panics. She and her husband embark on a search for their son, as the police won't intervene until he's been missing for 24 hours. Elsewhere, Slim and Jimmy arrive in Vegas for a brief respite, but Jimmy is mindful that he has only 2 days left before the wedding. He leaves Slim at a club, steals a scooter, and continues his journey. Eventually, he crosses paths with his parents' car, which tries to intercept him. In the ensuing chaos, Jimmy crashes, but his bubble shield miraculously lands him on a moving train. Having narrowly escaped his mother, Jimmy now finds himself trapped on a train with performers from a freak show. He learns that their boss, Dr. Freak, a dwarf, keeps them captive and exploits them in his show. Jimmy inadvertently uses his bubble to knock Dr. Freak down, frees the performers, and resumes his journey to Niagara Falls. Without a scooter, he enters a restaurant to ask for a ride. Inside, police officers harass a man named Pushpop. When Jimmy reveals his lack of immunity, the officers mistakenly believe he has an infectious disease and flee in panic. Amid the ensuing chaos, a fire starts, and Pushpop offers to take Jimmy to Niagara Falls. Elsewhere, Mrs. Livingston learns from Dr. Freak about Jimmy's destination and angrily confronts Chloe. As she talks with Dr. Freak, the freak performers steal her car. En route with Pushpop, Jimmy and his companion hit a cow, a sacred animal in Pushpop's religion. Heeding his mother's words, Jimmy dismisses Pushpop's beliefs, offending him and causing Pushpop to abandon him. Jimmy eventually reaches New York and hitches a ride with an elderly man named Pippi. The next morning, Jimmy realizes Pippi has passed away, causing them to crash into a billboard. Jimmy enters a grocery store and calls Chloe, but Mark picks up, taunting Jimmy about their imminent wedding. Despondent, Jimmy calls his mother for help. His parents arrive, and while Mrs. Livingston steps away, Jimmy and his father share a heartfelt moment. Inspired by his father's encouragement, Jimmy sets off to stop the wedding. His mother, the cult group, and Slim and his biker friends all join the chase. Slim and Mrs. Livingston, former lovers, lock eyes during the pursuit. They all find themselves on a runway, and Jimmy boards a plane with an elderly pilot. They fly towards Niagara Falls, but the plane crashes, sending Jimmy into the waterfall. Miraculously, his bubble keeps him from drowning. He makes his way to the chapel, interrupting Chloe, and Mark's vows to profess his love for her. Risking his life, he tears open his bubble to kiss her, then collapses unconscious. His parents arrive, and Mrs. Livingston is forced to reveal that Jimmy never had a condition. She had lied to protect him from the world's dangers. Shocked but understanding, Jimmy forgives his mother, and he and Chloe embrace to the sound of applause. Fast forward a few months, and Jimmy and Chloe are getting married, surrounded by all the people he met on his journey. Mr. Livingston, Mrs. Livingston, and Slim have formed a polyamorous relationship. The film concludes as Jimmy and Chloe drive off to their honeymoon.